You have to teach me how to say goddamn politics in French.
Hang on, is that what the GD is for? Oh, that's really good. I did not. I just thought it was your initials. I did not realize that was the pun.
I'm not that self-centered.
Wow.
I thought that was it, but I didn't want to assume. You put that in French, Philippe. Style politique?
Crise de politique, I guess.
Crise de politique? Yeah,
thing is, how vulgar do you want to go? Because we could go like deeply, because our swear words in Quebec are all like Catholic words, right? From Catholic backgrounds. So it depends how deep you want to go. If you want to say, oh, maudite politique, like damn politics, but you could go into like crise de tabarnak, the fucking merde de politique. So that's, that's not recorded, right?
That is recorded. That is
okay.
recorded.
Well, that's fine.
Hello and welcome to the GD Politics Podcast. I'm Galen Drew. At the start of the year, it looked like Canada was getting ready to repeat a political story we've seen play out across the globe. After decades-high levels of inflation, amid a shortage of affordable housing, and a backlash to liberal immigration policies, the unpopular incumbent, the Liberals, seemed destined for electoral defeat. But then two things happened. On January 6th, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, boasting a mere 22% approval rating, announced he would resign. And 2 weeks later, President Trump took office, talking about turning Canada into America's first state and threatening many and then levying some new tariffs on Canada. Since inaugurated, Canadian Conservatives have gone from a 23-point lead in the polls on average to a 4-point deficit today. Now, newly selected Liberal Prime Minister Mark Carney is testing whether that dynamic can last another month. This past Sunday, he called for a snap election to be held on April 28th. I could think of no one better to talk about all of this than the election forecasters of Canada. Carrying Canada's 538 mantle, we have Philippe Fournier, editor-in-chief of 338 Canada. Welcome to the podcast, Philippe.
Hello, Galen.
Also here with us is Eric Grenier, author of The Writ. Welcome to the podcast.
Happy to be here.
You both also co-host a podcast that is in English called The Numbers and in French, Les Chiffres. I'm curious, is this a bilingual podcast? Like, does one of you speak in English and the other replies in French?
We're mandated by the government to translate for every listener, both English and French. No, we do some episodes in English. Our podcast is mostly the English language podcast, The Numbers. And then once in a while, we also have a French language episode or two for Les Chiffres.
Although that's a pretty good idea. We should do a completely bilingual podcast, Eric. Okay, thank you, Galen. We'll take that up.
Yeah, I mean, my high school French only will get me so far in that circumstance. I'm curious, though, I mean, how much of the campaign happens in French versus English, and how many of the 40 million Canadians are actually bilingual?
Philip, do you know the numbers for the stats on bilingualism?
Yeah, about 10 million Canadians can speak French. And of course, about 80% of Canadians living in the province of Quebec have French as their mother tongue. And we have about 250,000 in New Brunswick, 500,000 in Ontario that speak French. So there are francophones throughout the country, but it's mostly Quebec, Ontario, and New Brunswick that have francophones. So I think it's like 24% of the population that speak French.
Yeah, and in terms of the campaign, like each of our campaign stops, the leaders tend to do both English and French. Sometimes they do the exact same thing in English and French, and they take questions from journalists in English and French. Those who are bilingual, and all of our leaders at least speak a little bit of both languages.
Otherwise, there's mayhem. And when a leader snubs a French question, you hear it in the media. It's a very sensitive issue, language, and so they are very careful about making sure that both languages are covered.
What an interesting dynamic. It's hard to imagine from an American perspective where our campaigns are waged decidedly in one language, although you do get every now and again the funny moment where somebody sort of goes out on a ledge and tries to campaign in Spanish, and sometimes it works and sometimes it really doesn't work. Okay, let's talk about those politics. How much of the shift in the polls, something like a 27-point shift in the span of a couple months is attributable to Justin Trudeau stepping aside versus the dynamics that President Trump has created with his talk of annexing Canada and the tariffs he's levied?
I think that it's a number of those factors. It's hard to separate them out. We haven't really seen some specific polling that would tell us like why Canadians are moving their vote around. I do think that Justin Trudeau's resignation did have a big impact because there were a lot of people who didn't like him anymore and they were tired of Justin Trudeau. And they might have been willing to vote for the Liberal Party, but they weren't willing to vote for it if Trudeau was the leader. So I think his resignation was the first act that moved the polls a little bit. And then you did have Donald Trump, and he has really, I don't think Americans, well, maybe they might have seen it on like CNN and stuff, but I don't think they can fully appreciate just how much of an impact it's had here in Canada.
Oh, yeah.
That, the 51st state stuff, we don't take that as a joke. That's, at first it was, kind of a stupid joke. And eventually it started to become pretty insulting. And I think we've seen in Canada just a huge shift in public opinion on anything. Like we're now booing the anthem at hockey games, and travel to the United States has plummeted. And you go to stores in Canada and it says, like, all the grocery store has made sure there's little signs that say that the product was grown in Canada so that people can buy Canadian products. So that has really changed people's views on politics. And I think it's changed what Canadians were looking for in terms of a government and a prime minister. And then in comes Mark Carney, kind of a dull technocrat. And in the context of threats from the United States, you have a volatile president there. The dull technocrat suddenly seems a lot more attractive to a lot of voters than it would have been the case had he become prime minister last fall when Donald Trump and threats and stuff weren't really a factor yet.
I would say also when the daily threats, because they are threats, right? I've heard some Americans say, "Oh no, he's just joking around. It's not that serious." No. It's really pissing people off here, and it's not funny anymore. It hasn't been funny for a while. And the initial reaction when Donald Trump started his daily threats, annexation and first state and tariffs, the Liberal government basically said, okay, we're not going to stand for this. Whereas the Conservatives' first reaction, they changed since, but the first reaction was, oh, well, this is obviously because of the Liberals. They made us weak. And we saw the numbers move right away. Like it was late January. There were initial signs of polling that showed that the Liberals were recovering, but the big movement happened after that. And then I think a lot of Canadians, the thing is, Canadians are not as partisan as U.S. voters. Right? Numbers can move a lot from one election cycle to another. And so many voters are swing voters, and they were like lending their vote to the Conservatives because they want to change. And now they see, well, change can happen without changing the party. So that's one way to see it too.
Okay, I have a lot of questions about Canadian politics because, the more research I did, the more interesting I found Canadian politics, and I think, as many of you probably know, Americans don't pay nearly as much attention to foreign countries' politics as they pay attention to our politics. But we gotta talk about that elephant in the room, which is like our president keeps talking about annexing your country. And you said that Canadians are taking it seriously. The polling shows that. I found a Leger poll that showed that 63% of Canadians say that Trump's expressed interest to make Canada the 51st American state must be taken very seriously, and a slim majority of respondents to the survey now say they're willing to personally defend Canada from a military threat. I think, right, you get the sense that on this side of the border, it feels, while strange, much more like a joke than your polling suggests. Now, is that like expressive responding, like, we're in this patriotic moment, so that's what we're saying? Or do you actually think that nearly 2/3 of Canadians think that America is preparing to take your country using military force?
Well, the thing is, it's not as if, we follow your politics. It's not as if it's been very predictable lately. And considering the chaos seems to be the new normal, we don't know what's going on there. We don't know what to expect. And obviously, we don't expect bombers above our cities right away. But if there is like the threat of, and I'm using your president's words, economic force to attack us, that's a first step towards other actions, you would think. And I have never seen this before in my life, going to the grocery store and people looking at products, oh, made in the USA, no thank you. And it's happening throughout the country. And you will have a lot of also snowbirds canceling their trips to the United States. Lots of